No, no, this can't be happening. The words barely escaped Claire's lips. Only seconds earlier, the ballroom had been filled with noise. Glasses clinked, laughter bounced off the walls, and old classmates traded stories after years apart. Then, a little girl no more than 6 or 7 years old walked straight through the crowd and stopped in front of me. "Are you Miss Hannah Parker?" I nodded. She reached into her small purse and handed me an old photograph. The instant Claire, the woman standing beside my former fiancé, saw it, all the color drained from her face. "No," she whispered, her hands beginning to tremble. "No, this can't be happening." The entire ballroom fell silent. Tyler looked from the photograph to his wife and then back again. "What's wrong?" he asked. Claire didn't answer. She only stared at the picture as though she had seen a ghost. And there, in the middle of my high school reunion, I realized that after 7 long years, the truth had finally found its way home. But to understand why that photograph mattered, you have to go back to the night my life fell apart. 7 years earlier, on the night before I enlisted in the Army, I was 25 years old and living in a small town outside Springfield, Missouri. Nothing about my life was glamorous. I worked mornings at a diner and evenings at a grocery store while preparing to leave for basic training. Most people thought I was crazy for joining the Army at my age. Maybe they were right. But after years of struggling financially, I wanted something bigger than the life I had been living. I wanted purpose. I wanted stability. Most of all, I wanted to prove something to myself. Back then, I believed I was going to build that future with my fiancé Tyler. We had been together since high school. Everyone expected us to get married. Our parents knew one another, and our families attended the same church. For years, people spoke about us as though we were already husband and wife. Tyler and Hannah. It sounded permanent. At least, I thought it did. The evening before I was scheduled to leave for basic training, I sat at my kitchen table finishing paperwork. The house was quiet, and my packed duffel bag rested near the front door. Everything I owned that truly mattered was inside it. Then Tyler knocked. I remember smiling when I opened the door. I also remember thinking that he looked nervous. I assumed he was emotional about saying goodbye. Instead, he walked into the kitchen and stood there without speaking. Something felt wrong immediately. "Tyler." He rubbed the back of his neck and took a deep breath. "We need to talk." Those 4 words have probably destroyed more peaceful evenings than any others in the English language. My stomach tightened. What's going on? He wouldn't look me in the eye. "I don't think we should get married." For a moment, I genuinely thought I had misunderstood him. "What?" "I'm sorry." "You're sorry for what?" He finally forced himself to speak. "Hannah, I met someone." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. Even years later, I could still remember exactly how the kitchen light reflected off the countertop, while my entire future collapsed. "Someone?" He nodded. "She's different." Different. What a ridiculous word. As though one vague adjective could explain the destruction of everything we had built. "How long?" "A few months." A few months. While I had been working double shifts preparing for enlistment and planning our future, Tyler had already been planning his escape. "Who is she?" He hesitated before answering. "Her name is Claire." Then he told me about her family. Claire's father owned several construction companies across Missouri and Kansas. They were wealthy, not merely comfortable, but the kind of wealthy people whispered about in small towns. Country club wealthy, lake house wealthy, private school wealthy. I laughed not because anything was funny, but because my mind could not process what was happening. "So that's it. You're leaving because she has money." "It's not just about money." Really. For the first time that evening, Tyler looked directly at me and told the truth. "I want security." I never forgot that sentence. I want security. As though I were a dangerous investment. As though loyalty, shared history, sacrifice, and love had somehow become less valuable than a wealthy family's bank account. "We were supposed to get married. I know, you asked me to marry you. I know. And now you're leaving me the night before I leave for basic training." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." Sorry was another useless word. I expected myself to scream. I expected to cry or demand explanations until my voice gave out. Instead, I felt strangely calm. The kind of calm that arrives when your heart breaks faster than your emotions can catch up. When were you planning to tell me? I thought it would be easier before you left. I nearly laughed again. Easier for whom? Certainly not for me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt enormous. Finally, I stood and walked to the front door. Tyler looked confused. What are you doing? Opening the door, Hannah. You made your choice. His eyes filled with guilt. Maybe he expected me to beg him to stay. Maybe he expected me to fight for him, to remind him of our history, or to convince him that I was worth choosing. But something inside me had already shifted. The truth was painfully simple. If a man could walk away that easily, then part of him had already been gone for a long time. So I opened the door and I let him leave. The next morning, I drove to the recruiting station before sunrise. I had not slept. My eyes burned and my chest felt hollow, but I showed up anyway. The bus arrived shortly after 6. A few nervous recruits stood nearby saying goodbye to their families. Parents cried. Girlfriends hugged boyfriends. Boyfriends held girlfriends. Promises were exchanged. Life continued moving forward. As I climbed onto the bus, I looked through the window one last time. Nobody was waiting for me. There was no fiancé, no goodbye kiss, and no promise that someone would be there when I returned. There was only an empty parking lot. For a brief moment, I wondered whether Tyler had been right. Maybe I was making a mistake. Maybe I was choosing the harder path. Maybe love really did not pay the bills. Then the bus pulled away, and something unexpected happened. I realized that, although I had lost the man I had planned to marry, I had not lost myself. Not yet. That realization became the first brick in a foundation I would spend years rebuilding. What I did not know was that 7 years later, a little girl carrying an old photograph would expose a secret powerful enough to silence an entire ballroom. The people who believed they had won would discover that some truths simply refused to stay buried. The first few weeks of basic training were among the hardest weeks of my life, but not because of the physical exhaustion, the endless drills, or the constant yelling. The hardest part came at night. When the noise stopped and the barracks grew quiet, I was left alone with my thoughts. And my thoughts always found their way back to Tyler, to my kitchen, and to the night he chose someone else. I carried that heartbreak everywhere. I carried it through obstacle courses, forced marches, every blister, every ache, and every sleepless night. At 25, I was older than many of the recruits around me. Most were fresh out of high school, and some still looked like children. Compared with them, I felt ancient. But my age gave me one advantage. I understood loss. And loss has a way of teaching endurance. Whenever training became overwhelming, I reminded myself that I had already survived something worse. I had survived watching the future I believed in disappear in a single conversation. Everything after that felt manageable. One morning during a particularly brutal run, a drill sergeant stepped directly into my path. "Why are you still moving, Recruit Parker?" Sweat covered my face and my legs felt like concrete. But I looked straight ahead and answered honestly. "Because stopping won't fix anything, Drill Sergeant." He stared at me for a second and then nodded. That became my philosophy. Stopping would not fix anything, so I kept moving. Weeks became months. Months became years. I completed basic training, advanced training, and my first assignment. For the first time since Tyler left, I began building a life that belonged entirely to me. There was no fiancé, no wedding plan, and no pressure to become the person someone else expected me to be. There was only me. The Army introduced me to people from every corner of the country. A ranch kid from Texas, a former school teacher from Ohio, a single mother from Georgia, and a mechanic from Michigan. We came from different backgrounds and carried different stories, but we shared the same determination. Many of them became closer to me than family. One of those people was Melissa. She was a staff sergeant when I first met her. She was sharp, funny, and completely incapable of sugarcoating anything. Several years after my enlistment, we sat outside together after a long day. The sun was setting and the sky glowed orange over the motor pool. Melissa handed me a bottle of water. "You still think about him?" I knew exactly whom she meant. "Sometimes." "Why?" I shrugged. "Because I thought he was my future." Melissa laughed, not cruelly but honestly. "No." "What?" "You thought he was your future. It turns out he was just your past." That sentence stayed with me. She was right. Some people are not meant to travel the entire journey with us. Sometimes they are only there long enough to push us toward the person we are supposed to become. Over time, Tyler became less important. The memories faded and the anger softened. Life became busy. I earned promotions, completed leadership courses, and accepted greater responsibility. The frightened woman who had boarded a bus with a broken heart slowly disappeared. In her place stood someone stronger, more confident, and no longer dependent on another person to define her worth. Occasionally, news from home reached me. Small-town gossip has an incredible ability to travel across state lines and military bases. Tyler married Claire less than a year after I left. By hometown standards, the wedding was extravagant. Her father reportedly paid for everything. Photographs appeared in local newspapers, a lakefront venue, a string quartet, expensive decorations, and hundreds of guests. It was the kind of wedding people discussed for years. I looked at exactly one picture. Then I closed my laptop and returned to work. Honestly, I did not care as much as people expected me to. I had soldiers depending on me, training schedules to manage, and goals to reach. The life I was building required my attention. My past did not. As the years passed, Tyler and Claire appeared to have everything. They lived in a beautiful house, took luxury vacations, drove expensive vehicles, and posted perfect holiday photographs. At least, that was the story social media told. By then, I had learned something many people do not understand until much later in life. Pictures tell stories, but they do not necessarily tell the truth. I stopped wondering whether Tyler was happy. His happiness was not my responsibility. Managing my own life was difficult enough. By the 6th year after our breakup, something surprising happened. I realized I no longer hated him. That did not mean I approved of what he had done. It did not mean I trusted him or believed his choices were acceptable. It simply meant he no longer occupied space in my heart. Forgiveness is strange. Sometimes it arrives quietly, without ceremonies or announcements. One day, you look inside yourself and realize the pain is simply gone. Then the envelope arrived. I found it in my mailbox after returning from work. The return address caught my attention immediately: Jefferson High School Alumni Association. I almost threw it away. I stood over the trash can with the envelope in my hand, wondering why I would attend a reunion after avoiding every alumni event since graduation. Most of the people there would feel like strangers. Others would be people I had not spoken to in years. And Tyler would probably attend. That fact alone nearly convinced me to decline. Melissa happened to be visiting when I opened the invitation. She read it and looked at me. "You should go." I laughed. "Absolutely not. Why, I don't need that kind of drama." "You think you would be going for him?" I shrugged. "Isn't that what everyone would assume?" Melissa rolled her eyes. "You wouldn't be going for him. Then why would I go?" She smiled. "Because the woman walking into that reunion would not be the same woman who left town 7 years ago." Her words hit harder than I expected, because they were true. The woman who had left town was devastated, frightened, and uncertain of her value. The woman standing in my kitchen now was stronger, wiser, and comfortable in her own skin. I thought about the invitation for several days. Then I surprised myself and mailed the RSVP. Yes, I would attend. I was not going to impress anyone, prove anything, or see Tyler. I was going because Jefferson High School was part of my story, and I was finally strong enough to revisit that chapter without becoming trapped inside it. Still, as the reunion approached, I could not shake a strange feeling. It was not exactly anxiety or excitement. It felt like something waiting just beyond my understanding, as though life were preparing to reveal a missing piece of my past. 7 years after Tyler walked out of my kitchen, I packed a suitcase and returned home, completely unaware that one photograph was about to change everything. The reunion was held at a renovated hotel overlooking the Missouri River. The building had not existed when we graduated. Back then, the land had been an empty lot beside an old warehouse. Now the hotel had polished wooden floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a ballroom large enough for weddings and corporate events. Places change. People do too. I arrived early, not because I was eager, but because old military habits die hard. Being 15 minutes early still felt dangerously close to being late. The ballroom was only half full when I entered. Some classmates recognized me immediately. Others stared for a few seconds before making the connection. "Hannah, wow, it's really you. You haven't changed." That last statement always made me laugh. Everyone changes. Some people simply wear those changes better than others. The evening began pleasantly. There were hugs, old stories, and high school photographs projected onto large screens around the room. People talked about marriages, children, careers, health scares, and new beginnings. Former athletes compared knee problems. Former class clowns spoke proudly about their families. People who had once been rivals laughed together. Life has a way of making old battles seem small. For a while, I genuinely enjoyed myself. Then Tyler walked in. The room noticed, not because he was famous or exceptionally important, but because some people never lose the ability to make an entrance. He looked older. We all did. Gray had begun appearing around his temples, and a few extra pounds had settled around his waist. Nothing dramatic, only the ordinary evidence of passing years. For one brief second, I saw the young man I had once planned to marry. Then the moment passed. Claire stood beside him, the millionaire's daughter, the woman he had chosen. She was still beautiful, wearing an elegant dress, perfect makeup, expensive jewelry, and the polished appearance I remembered. Yet something about her felt different. She smiled politely, but her eyes looked tired. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. At the time, I could not explain it. Now I understand. Tyler noticed me almost immediately. His smile froze for a fraction of a second before he recovered. "Hannah, Tyler." We shook hands. Two people who had once planned a wedding now greeted each other like distant coworkers. Life is strange. "You look good," he said. "So do you." It was a polite lie from both of us. We looked older. We looked real. There was nothing wrong with that. Claire stepped forward. "It's been a long time." "It has." Her smile seemed forced. Once again, I noticed something beneath the surface, but I could not identify it. The conversation lasted less than a minute before we moved on. For a while, everything remained civil. People mingled, soft music played, and dinner was served. Several classmates asked about my military career. I answered honestly, without exaggerating anything. The truth was interesting enough. I had built a meaningful life. That was all. As the evening continued, Tyler began drinking. Not enough to lose control, but enough to become louder and more like the man I remembered. The version of himself that always needed an audience. At one point, a former classmate asked whether joining the army had been worth it. Before I could answer, Tyler laughed. "That's a loaded question." The table gave a few uncomfortable chuckles. I smiled. "What does that mean?" He leaned back in his chair. "Oh, come on, let's be honest." His voice carried farther than he seemed to realize. "You gave up a lot." Several people exchanged uneasy glances. I knew where he was going, and strangely, I felt sorry for him. Confident people do not need public victories. Only insecure people need to perform them. "I've had a good life," I said. "I'm sure you have." His smile did not reach his eyes. Then someone mentioned retirement accounts. Another classmate made a joke about inflation, and the conversation shifted toward money. Tyler saw his opening. He raised his wine glass, grinning and performing for the room. Then he looked directly at me. Turns out, love doesn't pay the bills. The words landed exactly as he intended. It sounded like a joke, but everyone understood the meaning. He was not talking about economics. He was talking about us. about the choice he had made 7 years earlier. Several people looked down at their plates. Others forced awkward smiles. Nobody laughed. For a second, I felt the old wound. Not as pain, but as a memory. Then it disappeared. Unlike Tyler, I was no longer living in the past. I simply smiled. I suppose everyone pays their bills one way or another. A few people nodded, and the conversation moved on. Tyler looked disappointed, as though he had expected a larger reaction. Perhaps he had rehearsed that moment for years, and my refusal to fight had ruined it. About 20 minutes later, dessert was being served. The atmosphere had recovered. People were laughing again, and the band had started playing. I was talking with an old classmate near the edge of the ballroom when I noticed a little girl standing alone. She could not have been older than 7. She had dark hair, a blue dress, and a nervous expression. At first, I assumed she belonged to another hotel guest. Then she looked directly at me and began walking across the ballroom. She passed dozens of people and came straight toward me without hesitating. When she reached me, she stopped. "Are you Miss Hannah Parker?" Her voice was small, careful, and polite. "Yes." Relief appeared on her face. She reached into a small purse hanging from her shoulder and removed a photograph. "This is for you." I accepted it, confused. The photograph looked old. It had been folded and handled many times. Before I could study it, Claire saw what was in my hand. Her entire body went rigid. Her smile vanished, and the color drained from her face. For one long second, she looked like someone watching a nightmare come true. "No," she whispered. Her hands began to shake. People nearby turned toward her. Claire Tyler said. She did not look at him. She stared at the photograph in my hand as though she recognized every inch of it. Then she spoke again, loudly enough for half the room to hear. "No. No, this can't be happening." Every conversation in the ballroom stopped. For several seconds, nobody moved. Claire stared at the photograph as if it were a loaded weapon. Tyler looked completely confused. "What is it?" She did not answer. Claire. Still nothing. The little girl beside me shifted nervously. Dozens of eyes were now focused on us. The music had stopped. Even the hotel staff seemed uncertain about whether they should intervene. I finally looked down at the photograph. The moment I saw it, I understood why Claire was terrified. I recognized it too. I had not seen that picture in 7 years. Not since the day Claire gave it to me. The photograph showed 2 women sitting together on a park bench. One was Claire, the other was me. The date printed in the corner was from 1 week before Tyler ended our engagement. My stomach tightened. I looked up slowly. Claire's eyes were filling with tears, and just like that, the memories came rushing back. 1 week before Tyler left me, Claire called. At that time, I barely knew anything about her. I knew only her name and that she existed. I could still remember the conversation. "Yes, this is Claire." At first, her name meant nothing to me. Then she explained who she was, and my entire body went cold. Could we meet? I nearly hung up. Instead, curiosity overcame my anger. We agreed to meet at a small park outside town. I expected arrogance. I expected a spoiled rich girl who felt proud of taking another woman's fiancé. Instead, I found someone frightened. Very frightened. Claire looked nothing like the polished woman people would later see in wedding photographs and social media posts. She looked exhausted, as though she had not slept in weeks. We sat on a bench beneath a large oak tree. For several minutes, she could not look at me. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't know about you." That was not what I expected. What when Tyler and I started seeing each other, he told me you had broken up months earlier. I stared at her. Claire began crying. It was not dramatic or manipulative. It was the kind of crying that comes when someone realizes she has unknowingly helped destroy another person's life. "I found out the truth last week." Neither of us knew what to say. Then she revealed the second shock. She was 3 months pregnant. I sat in stunned silence. Suddenly, everything made sense. Tyler's distance, his lies, his urgency, and the future he had chosen. Claire was not simply the wealthy woman he preferred. She was carrying his child, and he had lied to both of us. For nearly an hour, Claire and I talked not as rivals and not as enemies, but as two women trying to understand how we had become trapped inside the same lie. At some point, we asked a stranger nearby to take a photograph of us on the bench. It was the photograph I now held in the ballroom. "We should keep this," Claire had said. "Why?" "Because someday we might need proof that we both knew the truth." Then she gave me something else, a handwritten note. In that note, Claire explained exactly what Tyler had told her when she had learned about me, when she confronted him, and how he convinced her to stay. I kept the photograph and the note, not because I was planning revenge, but because life had already taught me that the truth matters, even when no one wants to hear it. 1 week later, Tyler came to my kitchen and ended our engagement. I never showed him the photograph. I never revealed Claire's note. I never exposed either of them. Honestly, I was too busy surviving. Then the army happened. My life moved forward, the years passed, and the entire situation became a closed chapter. Or so I thought. Standing in the ballroom, I finally began to understand. The little girl looked remarkably like Claire. She had the same eyes, the same dark hair, and the same smile. She had to be their daughter. But why did she have the photograph? The answer arrived moments later when an older woman rushed through the crowd. Claire's mother. I recognized her from old newspaper photographs. She looked horrified. "Oh my God!" Claire covered her face. "Mom!" Her mother turned toward me. "Hannah, I'm so sorry. Nobody else understood what was happening, least of all Tyler." "What is everyone talking about?" he demanded. "What photograph?" Claire finally looked at him. For the first time that evening, I saw genuine anger in her eyes. Not fear, not embarrassment. Anger. "Our daughter found it." The room seemed to shrink. Tyler blinked. "What?" "The photograph." Claire pointed toward my hand. "She found it in a box." By then, everyone was openly listening. Nobody even pretended otherwise. The little girl looked confused. "I wasn't supposed to." Claire immediately knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong." Her voice softened, and then she began to cry. The child wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. My heart broke a little. Children always end up paying for mistakes they never made. The room remained silent, waiting. Tyler looked increasingly uncomfortable. "What exactly is the problem?" Claire stood slowly. Then she said the words that changed everything. "The problem is that Hannah knew the truth 7 years ago." A murmur spread through the crowd. Tyler's face lost its color. "The truth about what?" Claire gave a bitter laugh. "The truth about us." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. "He lied to both of us," she said, her voice cracking. "He lied to her." She pointed toward me. "And he lied to me." Claire wiped the tears from her face. For 7 years, Hannah protected a secret she never had to protect. That statement struck harder than any accusation because it was true. I could have exposed them. I could have humiliated Tyler publicly. I could have shared the note, the photograph, and every detail of what he had done. But I chose not to. Not because they deserved protection, but because I wanted peace. The people in the ballroom slowly began to understand. This was not the story of a woman seeking revenge. It was the story of a woman who had never needed revenge. Tyler looked around the room. The sympathy he might have expected was not there. Neither was admiration. For the first time, people saw exactly who he had been. Not a successful businessman, not a charming husband, and not the man who had made the practical choice. They saw a man whose decisions had hurt everyone around him. Standing in that silent ballroom, Tyler finally understood that money could not buy back respect. For years, he had controlled the story. In his version, he was the successful one. The man who chose security, left behind a struggling fiancé, and built a comfortable life with a wealthy family. Now everyone was seeing the real version. The worst part for him was not simply that people knew. It was that he knew they were judging him quietly. They were not judging him for ending a relationship. Relationships fail. People fall out of love. Life changes. They were judging him for the way he had done it. They judged the lies, the manipulation, and the way he used two women who trusted him. They judged the fact that he had spent 7 years presenting himself as a victim of circumstances, when he had been the author of every choice. Eventually, the reunion continued. People began speaking again. The music resumed, and the waiters cleared the tables. But the atmosphere had changed. The illusion was gone. About 30 minutes later, I stepped outside onto the hotel's riverside terrace. The Missouri River reflected the city lights. The air was cool and peaceful, exactly what I needed. I leaned against the railing and watched the water. For the first time all evening, I allowed myself to breathe. The door opened behind me. I did not need to turn around. I already knew who it was. Tyler stopped several feet away. Neither of us spoke immediately. Finally, he sighed. I don't know what to say. I continued looking at the river. That's probably a first. A weak smile crossed his face and quickly disappeared. I deserve that. Maybe. My honesty surprised him. For years, I had imagined a conversation like this. In every version, I was furious. I delivered a devastating speech, forced him to understand my pain, and walked away victorious. But standing there beside the river, I felt none of that. Mostly, I felt tired. I was tired of carrying a story that no longer belonged to me. Tired of remaining connected to a mistake from 7 years earlier. Tyler stared at the water. I was a coward. I did not answer. He was right, and some truths do not require confirmation. I kept telling myself I was doing the responsible thing, he continued. I convinced myself that choosing security made me smart. I finally looked at him. Did it? He laughed quietly, but there was no happiness in it. No. The answer came too quickly and too honestly to be rehearsed. For the first time that evening, I saw something real in him. Regret. Not the dramatic regret people perform after getting caught. This was the quieter kind. The kind that sits beside you for years and visits in the middle of the night. The kind that asks questions no one else can answer. What if I had been honest? What if I had stayed? What if I had been a better man? Tyler rubbed his eyes. I hurt both of you, yes. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything. No, it doesn't. But I am sorry. This time, I believed him. Not because he deserved forgiveness, but because he was not asking me for anything. He was not asking me to comfort him, erase the past, or tell him that everything was all right. He was simply acknowledging what he had done. Sometimes that is the most a person can do. We stood quietly for a while. Then the terrace door opened again. Claire stepped outside. For a moment, she looked nervous, as though she expected hostility. Instead, I gave her a small smile. She approached slowly. I wasn't sure whether I should come out here. You can. She nodded and looked directly at me. I owe you an apology, too. I shook my head. No. Her eyes widened. Hannah, you were young. You were scared, pregnant, and being lied to. Tears formed in her eyes. I still stayed. Yes. You should hate me. I thought about her words, then I looked at the woman standing in front of me. I did not see a millionaire's daughter or the rival who had taken my fiancé. I saw another human being who had spent years carrying her own regrets. No, I said softly. I don't hate you. The tears spilled down her cheeks. For a moment, none of us spoke. The river continued flowing. The city lights shimmered, and life moved forward as it always does. Eventually, Claire laughed through her tears. You know something funny? What? All these years I thought you hated me. I smiled. All these years I thought you hated me. That made all three of us laugh. Somehow that simple moment felt more healing than anything else that had happened that night. A little later, Claire's daughter came outside looking for her parents. The moment she saw me, she smiled. Miss Hannah! I knelt in front of her. Hi, I'm sorry if I caused trouble. My heart nearly broke. Children are remarkable. They so often assume responsibility for problems created by adults. You didn't cause any trouble. Really, really. Relief filled her face. Then she hugged me. It was completely unexpected and completely sincere. In that moment, I understood something. That little girl had accidentally accomplished what none of the adults had managed to do for 7 years. She had brought the truth into the open. Not because she wanted revenge, and not because she was angry, but because children do not understand why adults hide things that should never have become secrets. A few days later, before returning to my duty station, I visited my parents' graves. The cemetery rested on a quiet hill outside town, the same place my family had visited every Memorial Day when I was growing up. I stood there for a long time, thinking, remembering, and reflecting on everything that had happened. 7 years earlier, I believed losing Tyler was the worst thing that could happen to me. I had been wrong. Sometimes losing the wrong person is the first step toward finding yourself. The army gave me purpose. The years gave me perspective. Time gave me peace. Money can buy comfort. It can buy houses, cars, vacations, expensive weddings, and social status. But money cannot buy character. It cannot buy integrity. And it cannot buy the ability to look into a mirror and respect the person staring back. That kind of respect must be earned, one decision at a time and one day at a time. Life has a way of revealing the truth eventually. Not always quickly, not always dramatically, but eventually. When that moment comes, the only thing that truly matters is whether you have lived in a way that allows you to stand inside the truth without being ashamed. Tyler once told me that love did not pay the bills. Maybe he was right about one thing. Love alone cannot solve every practical problem. But neither can money. Money could not protect him from the consequences of his choices. It could not erase the lies, restore the trust he had broken, or purchase the respect he had lost. In the end, the most valuable thing I possessed was not wealth, status, or someone else's approval. It was peace. And unlike everything Tyler had chosen over me, my peace had been earned. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the choices that shaped your own life. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that character matters more than appearances, and that peace is often found not through revenge, but through letting go. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, second chances, and the lessons life teaches us, remember to like, share, and subscribe. The end.